Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And we've been away for a while.
We have.
You've been in Bologna.
I've been in Bologna for Il Cinema Ritrovato, which was fantastic.
As always.
And then I've been a week in London catching up on plays.
And I've been in Amsterdam and Ireland. And now we're back at the cinema and we've been to see F1.
Yes.
So
You've seen it twice.
This is the second time I've seen it. Jen is mad about F1. And, since we started going out, I have become mad about F1. Because I used to sort of watch it. When I was a kid, F1 was really boring. Schumacher won all the time, and it wasn't that interesting to look at. And then Lewis Hamilton got involved, and he was young, he was black, which he was like very new for F1. He was English, and he was amazing. Like right at the start of his career, he was winning races and sort of shaking things up really excitingly. So then it was exciting for a while, and then it got boring again. Then in the last few seasons, it's kind of interesting, and there was a whole thing with the end of, I think it was 2021, when Lewis Hamilton should have won his record-breaking 8th title and didn't in this shit show of a last lap, which is kind of played out here. But then, I've got into it again, but now I've got into it in a different way, because it was sort of about the driving before, and now that I get into it and I learn about all these new drivers who are all like 20 years old, I realise that F1 is all about the social media, the engagement, the circus of it all. And I'm like, this is not as good as it used to be, I wish for the days of the old drivers. But this film has come out of this era of F1 is now, it's figured out how to start marketing itself to kind of a younger generation, a generation that's constantly online. I think that's completely what this film comes out of, because this film is made heavily with the collaboration of the FIA that runs F1. And it's made with real F1 drivers, they're not in it loads. They're in it kind of to the side. It's a fictional story about drivers played by Brad Pitt and Damson Idris, but it's completely covered with real F1 stuff. So F1 fans, people who know F1, will appreciate that stuff.
No, clearly they do, and I think this is the point where I might say I'm completely uninterested in it. I don't even drive a car. I have no care about any of that. On the other hand, we did do the Nürburgring together. Well, you drove it, and I was
the Nürburgring.
The Nürburgring, yes. So we actually kind of raced through that. Me as your passenger. So wasn't. I'm not uninterested in the culture of it, but I really am uninterested in all that has to do with cars. So I think that's interesting because the film, in order to be successful, has to address everyone, including me.
It's reported to have cost between $200 and $300 million.
Yeah,
this is huge, and it's made 350 odd.
Yeah, so it'll make its money back.
It will make money, and it is making money, and part of that is the draw of someone like Brad Pitt
and Javier Bardem.
And part of it is that it's interesting to me that sports films very often are not set in the modern day. They're very often period pieces. They're very often true stories, and they're true stories about something that happened in a previous era. Right? I mean, if you think about other racing films in particular, Rush is probably the best regarded.
I love Rush.
Yeah, and that was from 2013 or so. But it's about a racing rivalry in the 1970s. And that's really par for the course of sports films. And a sports film that is set bang up to date is actually fairly unusual.
Yeah, I mean the last one that came out was Ford versus Ferrari, which is obviously a period piece.
Yeah, that's back in the 60s. That's set.
So,
but not just racing, right? You think about like boxing, baseball, football, whatever it is. These are about these are the stories that we told of the great things that happened in the past or whatever. And it's not that you don't get them set in the modern day, but this feels a bit unusual for that reason. Just to see such modern cars driving around, you see that on the telly. You don't see it in film. It's quite interesting.
Sports films are notoriously tricky,
yeah,
and very few of them work. I mean, it's amazing how much they continue to make them, in spite of their relative lack of success. Yeah, I mean, the only thing that seems to have worked pretty consistently is the boxing film. And it's, I mean, the boxing film, it becomes a metaphor for, working class and ethnicity in America and in American cinema. So kind of you can see how that in a way gives it a leg up in relation to other films, which, films about skiing, notoriously unsuccessful, right, etc. And the racing car films have been a mixed bag. I think all of the major stars, Paul Newman and Steve McQueen and James Garner in the 60s, early 70s, they all did. Yves Montand, they all did racing films, again with mixed success, really. But this is a successful one.
This is very successful. I would say it's not a great film, but I've enjoyed it twice now, very much. I've got half a mind to go through this film with a notepad, writing down every cliche that there is. I agree. I don't think there is a film that has more cliche and more tropes than this. This one goes head first at them, like it's trying to get a record. And the thing is, I'm here for it. Like, that is kind of what I'm here for. I had no expectations that this would be the most original film I've ever seen. And I kind of knew, in broad strokes, like, okay, so it's about an aging racing driver, played by Brad Pitt, who 30 years ago was racing in F1 as a kid. We hear about him racing with Senna and Schumacher and Prost.
That is its own cliche, like the old gunfighter,
and his old teammate, played by Javier Bardem, now runs a team in F1 called Apex GP. Apex GP is $350 million in the hole. It's never won a point, and if by the end of this season they don't win a race, then Javier Bardem is out, basically. And so his last roll of the dice is to call on his old mate, Brad Pitt, who's now racing in, we see at the start, he's racing in Daytona 24, and he's like a gun for hire. Like, he doesn't have a regular thing going on. He turns up, he wins races for people, and he goes away and lives in his van. And he decides to get involved in this.
But more than that, let's be explicit, because also he's destroyed his life through women and gambling.
Yes.
So, he is living in a van, not by choice. However much he claims freedom or whatever, right? He is living paycheck to paycheck. We get a sense of that.
Yeah. But nonetheless, you also get the sense that he's very comfortable and he's willing and able to turn down stuff he doesn't want to do.
Sure.
He has that vibe about him too.
Yes.
And he decides that he
like
will...
the lone gunslinger.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the characters says, do you think you're some kind of cowboy? And I think it's interesting. It's sort of unstated, but I think it's very crucial to the film that he's American, because I was thinking about what other actors could play his role, right? Brad Pitt is really well suited to this. I think as he's got older, he's become very comfortable with appearing older on film and playing older characters who have this kind of vibe.
And also he's looser.
Yeah.
As an actor.
But I was thinking, who else could play it? Like Javier Bardem, who's in the film, you could see him doing it. You could see Antonio Banderas. But the thing about them is, being European and F1 being so associated with Europe, it is a global sport, but it's very heavily associated with Europe. And that's kind of where it comes from. I sort of think that the outsider aspect of Brad Pitt's character is really helped along by the fact that he's American too. So, like, Americans have raced in F1, they've won F1. It's not that it's alien to Americans, but he carries that feeling of outsiderness. I think Americanness helps to carry that.
I don't know. I mean, I had this whole thing throughout the film because, on the one hand, I was thinking, oh my God, this is so good, the way that, they're incorporating kind of black people and, Latino people and Europeans and so on. And then, at the end of it, but, the blue-eyed Aryan always comes out on top, doesn't he? It's like, Yeah. So, I mean, I think the thing about Brad Pitt is he's aging, he's old, but he's become more and more appealing as he's gotten older because he's looser. He's less kind of high-strung, right? Whereas actually the thing about Antonio Banderas and Javier Bardem, to me, is that they're still quite high-strung. They're intense. Right, they're not cool in the way that Brad Pitt. You get a sense of take it or leave it kind. He's
well, that's certainly the character he's been asked to play here, and he suits it perfectly.
Yeah, it's part of his persona as well, I think.
When you think about him in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, has that same vibe of someone whose career hasn't gone as well as it should have done. He's he's basically chauffeuring for Leonardo DiCaprio's character. He's he's theoretically his stuntman, but he's like fixing his roof and shit like that. But he's cool with it. Like that's where my life's gone, and I'm cool with it. And he has that here basically.
Yeah, very much so. He's incredibly appealing. And actually, I think the person, and just to get this off my chest, it's probably not the best place in the podcast to put it, but when I saw Javier Bardem, it was like, wow, because it made me realize, because he was so incredibly handsome when he was young, right? And he was like a real sex bomb and everything. And then throughout his whole international career, he's always played kind of, I don't know, villains or tortured people, or like the guy and There Will Be Blood, right? Like with that wig and the
not There Will Be Blood.
A Country for Old Men.
No Country for Old Men. Sorry.
Yeah, and you think, what a loss, because really he was so good looking, so sexy, but also so charming. And in Spain, he did a lot of romantic comedies and things like that, right? Whereas his whole international career had been like, intense people, intense situations, paraplegics, or and actually it was kind of nice to see him, he's intense in this as well, but he's handsome and he's loose and he's like an ordinary person, right? Like, and it was wonderful to see him just let himself come across as appealing as well.
Yeah. I mean, an ordinary person who is able to be $350 million in the hole. Like, that's the thing this film has, right? It's thoroughly unrealistic in all these ways. It's a complete fantasy, but you get to imagine these people the way you would like to imagine them. Like, when you're making this movie, you go, this could be like a really intense drama. He's constantly having to, deal with the fact that his basically entire life is on the line if he loses this, and it's not going to happen. But it's a F1 fantasy.
Yeah.
I mean, I was. The racing is incredibly exciting in this.
Yeah.
It's incredibly intense.
Even for me, who doesn't know anything about it, it was exciting to watch.
And we saw this, you say, at the Mockingbird. So when we first saw this, Jen and I, we saw it at the IMAX in Birmingham, which is like the place to see it. It's such a big screen. It's so loud. It was wonderful. Really intense. And here, the screen is of a very good quality at the Mockingbird.
The image was wonderful.
The image is incredible. Obviously, it's much smaller than the IMAX Digital, but we were still front and centre, and it was fantastic, and the sound was great, and it was still,
I thought it was wonderful.
Fantastically intense. It looks marvellous. The camera's right down low, you get that real feeling of speed. They were filming it like real races and things, and there's a lot that's made up, there's a lot that's specifically they went filming for themselves, obviously, to get the shots they needed, but they also incorporated, from what I understand, real race footage, and then, in post-production, got rid of all the logos and put on, the right logos for the fictional cars and so on. The sense of intensity and realism is very rich, and it tickles me to think of the people who will be drawn to F1 because of how exciting this film is, to then find out that watching a real race is like watching Microsoft Excel. Yeah. Like, when you're watching a real race, it's like you've got the timing board on the left, and it's all about which order the drivers are in and how many seconds they are behind. It's just like the racing is not reliably as interesting as this.
Well, let's linger a little bit about that, because I think, for me, it was so exciting to watch. Because the director and the cinematographer have constructed this extraordinary look for the film. It feels like almost neon bright, right? With rich darks, and I love the whole kind of look of the film. The compositions were so striking. The way that the characters looked inside their helmets with their cheeks kind of jutting out. I found that, all of it kind of like really, really great. And one of the things that I thought was also great is the way that the film graphically visualizes the tension of what's happening on the race course, right? Through those video graphics, showing you where they are in relation to each other, right? And also the montages, which I think are so good. I think also the structure of the narrative is also very good, right? Because they tell you we have raced X races, I forget how many, we now have 9 more or something like that, right? So you already know there's going to be 9 races, like kind of, so you have like kind of a really tight structure, beautiful visuals, a kind of a dynamic and kind of a rhythmic editing that propulses you along. And actually what I found was not good about the film, which you mentioned as a series of cliches, but actually I thought it was more about the direction of the players. That, often there's meant to be like humor or a human connection, that is quite cliche to begin with, and then that doesn't quite land, right? So I'm thinking, for example, of the scene where Javier Bardem catches Brad Pitt and the designer of the cars,
Kerry Condon.
In the same apartment, she pretends he's not there, whatever, and then she admits that he's there, and that's meant to, the last line is meant to land a laugh.
Well, I can tell you the first time we saw it in the IMAX, because there was only 3 of us today, in the IMAX there were people, and that line got a good laugh.
Yeah, well, I thought kind of everything seemed slightly off, really.
Yeah. It was extremely predictable.
It was very predictable. And also, and I thought all the human connections were extremely predictable.
Yeah.
And you think another director, because the actors I think are brilliant, so I don't think you can blame them. But I think it is something about the timings or something that, it feels more cliches than it should, even though you recognize the cliche.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I was talking about cliche, part of it is like the performances contain cliche as well. The way that those lines are delivered contributes to that. It's not just that this is the line that we've heard before. This is the plot twist that we've seen before. It's the delivery of it conveys that too.
I wondered if it had to do with the actors who've been at it a long time, because I think Pitt and Bardem are absolutely kind of charming in it, and they're wonderful. And I think some of the younger actors who are also wonderful, but then some of their moments feel more awkward than they should, right? And I do think it's the director's fault, actually.
See, I kind of think of this as an extremely expensively made, very cheap film. Like,
I don't think that,
because that cheapness is in this is how a very mediocre plot and dialogue and kind of and story work in cheap movies. But it's been made with expensive actors, expensive cinematography, expensive action.
Okay, so we're maybe saying the same thing. I mean, It's got a B-movie plot, right? But my God, the production values, you see them on the screen. I mean, it looks fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is not the look of a B-movie, let me tell you.
No, that's what I say. The cheapness is more fundamental. But it's been made very expensively. And it's great. But the thing is, like I say, I wasn't expecting much else. I'm very much here for it. Like, I started to celebrate the amount of cliche. It's like, yes, here's another one.
Yeah,
it's like it's that kind of, to me, I was like finding joy in that stuff.
Yeah, I don't like it because I realized that I had written on Kosinski, the director, before.
Joseph Kosinski.
Yeah. And so I looked it up, and on Oblivion, I go on about how astonishingly amazing visually the film is, right? But it kind of narratively doesn't seem to work, and so on. Yeah, and that kind of narrative aspect is kind of a little bit what I'm talking about here, about human elements and
well, he also made Tron Legacy, the Tron reboot, which was really the film that kind of prefigured. I think we have got used to reboots now of films from previous generations. And I think that was probably about the first. That was in about 2011 or so. And it seemed weird at the time to be bringing back a movie that would be made in 1980 odd. And now it's like, of course, it's normal,
And it was also one of those films that, from my memory at least, it looked amazing.
It looked incredible.
But didn't quite work somehow.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
And a lot of people said that. And then he directed the Top Gun reboot more recently.
Yes.
So we are well into the age now of the old movie reboots, and that we liked enormously.
We did.
But still, with the story, we're like, yeah, I mean, it's like it's you've seen the story before somewhere.
Yeah.
But all of that, the way it's made, the way the action works, the way it feels,
and
really works.
There's a link, I think, between the Maverick film and this one, because all those contests between the young men and so on were so predictable. And the actors were brilliant, and also it worked, but you felt you'd been you recognized the cheapness of it, really. So this is kind of the same here, but maybe a bit. It worked better in Maverick Top Gun than it did here. Those cliches, really.
Yeah, probably, or at least they came across as less blatant.
Yes, there were fewer of them.
Here, I was thinking. There's a kind of film that I refer to as the corporate biopic, which is the film about Steve Jobs or about the founder of BlackBerry or about that kind of the founder of McDonald's, which are kind of, sometimes they're very good, but they're often kind of thinly veiled advertising exercises. Certainly the McDonald's one was. I mean, I watched a bit of that fucking film, The Founder it's called, and the opening, I couldn't make it through, it's awful. But the opening of it has the two guys behind the original McDonald's talking about, how we make all this fast food and we have a station here and a station there and the food moves really quickly. And you're thinking, wow, if only it worked like that today. Like, McDonald's is so fucking slow now. But it's like advertising for a company that was great 70 years ago.
Sure.
But actually I was thinking, because this has F1 behind it completely. Sure. Right? It's got the F1 logo all over it. They've shot it.
That was a bit shameless, actually. I thought, the whole thing is really like a huge advertisement for Expensify, Tommy Hilfiger, as well as obviously the FI.
F1, yeah.
F1.
Yeah, absolutely. And to an extent, that makes it realistic. F1 is covered in sponsors. People go out looking like advertising boards. But
another era of films, they would have made up a name or something.
Yeah, made up sponsors and things.
Yeah, it makes you feel less of a sucker as a viewer.
I sort of know what you mean. But like this is a huge advertising exercise. This is meant to bring people to F1 and affect what the image of F1 is. Like I say, that image that I grew up with of F1 was it's incredibly stuffy, it's incredibly boring. You're just watching numbers on a screen. It's like all the men commentating sound like this. They're all quite nasal and and they're trying to really modernise and youngify it and all that kind of shit. And they're doing a decent job of it here. Like they are completely changing, not just here but in real life, they are changing the image of what F1 is. They've turned it into something much more fashionable than that image was. But I was thinking actually that corporate biopic thing is not quite right. This is more like those giant action movies that are made with the aid of the US military. You know what I mean? Like I think probably Top Gun had a bit of that, and Michael Bay's had loads. Michael Bay used to brag about how the military had supplied all of these aircraft carriers and shit to make his films. It's like, yeah, you're making propaganda for the military here, right? This is much more benign. It's only F1, but it has that vibe, right?
It does, and it does leave a sour aftertaste. I mean, I think it is one of the characteristics of the culture, really. And just because you're bullied into it or because you have no choice about it, doesn't mean that the experience is any nicer for it, right? Like, I mean, I really, 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 really resent the sheer amount of ads that you now have in YouTube, right? So that, I used to watch podcasts before I went to bed, and now I can't watch them anymore because there's so many ads that it keeps you awake turning them off, right? And then if you somehow fall asleep during that, then the algorithm switches me on to some Christian evangelical channel, and you wake up with like someone screaming about God or hell, and it becomes like a kind of a nightmare thing, really. It does. I hate it, really, and I've stopped doing it, right? And I think there are limits to how much you can just be a receptacle for advertising. Yeah, and that is definitely kind of something about the film, and it makes me absolutely question, whether filmmakers have the right to call themselves artists at all at this point. I'm like so fed up with them, right? Like that was my art, and you think you're just fucking selling FI or F1. What the fuck is your art, right? And I was conscious that there are so few films being made about ordinary people and the things that matter to us, right? Like falling in love or starting families or kind of finding a calling or, whatever, you might think of as, the things that concern us as everyday things, buying a house and the problems of buying one. I mean, that is the stuff of drama, really, and nobody's doing that, right? They're all selling you fucking FI or F1 or whatever. So, yeah. I'll get off my high horse.
That's cool.
But I was really thinking that because I read this book also by Edouard Louis called Changes, and it was all about, I read that book, and also it made me think there's another British book, very famous, it was a huge hit a couple of years ago, called Young Mungo, which is about a kid growing up in the council estate in Edinburgh, I think, Scotland. And I was thinking, and the both books deal with class and issues of sexuality. That both of the young men in the thing are gay, but the Edouard Louis book is really about class. So he is gay also, but the book is about class, and being told off for not knowing how to hold a fork, for being too loud, for not having proper teeth. Kind of the way that kind of people from another class kind of find to put working class people in their place. Right, so the book is all about that, and he also happens to be gay. Whereas The Young Mungo, it really is about the sexuality, right? And the levels of poverty in both books are the same. Anyway, all of this to say that, basic fundamental questions of our society, our culture, our lives are not being addressed through what is ostensibly, the greatest art of the last 100 years, right? And I think it is a real problem. Yeah, and I think next time some filmmaker says I'm an artist, I'll tell them to show me how. Yeah. Right,
Yeah.
because selling F1 is not what art used to be about.
No. I remember about 20 years ago, Roger Ebert wrote an article about how video games weren't art. And this got a lot of people's backs up because video game fans love to think that it's art. And they're saying, well, this game could be art, this game's art, this game's art. They were giving all these examples of like the really great... There are great games with really great design and everything. But Roger Ebert was saying, no, Joe, I think in principle, just a thing that you have to play, a thing that you can affect and change can't be art. Art has to be something that you're shown, that you're told, whatever. And then I think he went on to make the point that, people think that I'm saying, like, well, films are art and your things aren't art. And so they just hate me for that. But most films aren't art either, he says. Like, it's a high bar to clear. Yeah. I just think that, like, in the video game world, it's something that can't be cleared at all because of their nature. But he was like, it's not just like an automatic thing that films get either.
The argument,
be really good.
The argument, I think, was loudest, if not most clearly expressed, in relation to advertisements. Right, where people at one point wanted to claim that some advertisements were so amazing that they were art, right? And the question was, well, something that is entirely designed to sell you bread or whatever, how is it art, right? Like, I mean, it's not teaching you anything, it's not giving you an experience, it's not enlarging your sense of society or what it is to be human. It's just making you want to buy bread, right? Like that's the purpose of it. So how is that art, right? It might be beautiful or exciting to watch or whatever. Right, but it doesn't fulfill any of the functions that you normally expect of art. And I do think that there's a little bit about this in F1.
It's an advert that you paid to see.
Yeah.
And I think you do go in with it with that understanding.
Sure.
There is that. I think that to speak more positive about it again, this is something that F1 fans should get a big kick out of.
I like the film.
There's a lot. No. Specifically talking about F1 fans who know, in some detail what they're looking at. There's a lot that they will get out of this. They recognise the drivers. You like seeing X, Y, Z. They recognise the way that those graphics look. They recognise Martin Brundle on commentary, who you wouldn't have any idea who that is, but we hear him and see him, and we love. It's like he is the voice of F1 commentary, that sort of thing. Not Brundle, Crofty. Yeah, Jen's looking at me. Crofty's the commentator. Brundle does like the pit walk and stuff. But anyway, like these people who are the face of F1, they present it every week that it's on TV. They're there and they're doing the commentary and everything. Like these are the people that we see. These are the images that we see. These are the logos and the races and the drivers. That's all there, and that lends the film an awful amount of credibility and stuff like. But I did sort of think to myself, like, there's no one who will 100% appreciate this film because either you're like you and you know nothing, but you appreciate story, excitement, drama,
visually,
all that kind of stuff.
Fantastic,
right? But it means that you won't be appreciating. Oh, there's that driver. Oh, there's Lewis Hamilton's dog.
Exactly. Well, I was responding to Jen, responding to that.
Exactly.
Yeah, and actually, that's a beautiful thing about watching films with other people, is that their response makes you aware of a lack, or that there's something going on that you're not aware of, or yeah. So
on the other hand, if you're the person who recognises all that stuff, it's impossible to fully appreciate it because details like that are things you get bogged down in. And like we were chatting a little bit before, and you heard some of the criticisms that Jen had of like, well, it wasn't like this, or that's not right, and it's like, but to you it doesn't matter at all, right? This is complete fiction. It doesn't matter that it wasn't really like that this driver wasn't racing at the same time this other driver was. It's pure fiction. But like, so even though you should be able to appreciate, oh, I recognise him and him and him and him, there's still, like, if you're the kind of person who recognises all of that and has that level of interest, the detail then throws you off in a way.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't know, because I get a similar thrill out of, if you're watching a 1940s film and you recognise stars that aren't quite stars yet, or there will be stars, you get a thrill out of seeing them. And it doesn't necessarily spoil my pleasure in the film or the narrative, or it doesn't, And actually, I think this thing about spotting, like in some films, it's spotting pop stars, that are background figures in them. I mean, it does in a way, I suppose, take you out of the narrative if you expect total immersion in it, right? Like, but it is one of the added pleasures,
It should be. But I'm really just talking about the nerdiest of the nerdiest here.
Yeah.
That's like, that's just a thing that comes with that territory sometimes. I've kind of been there. Like, I'm not that, but if you remember... So I'm not like that about this film. I think I've chilled out a bit. And also I don't know all those details to the extent that others do. But if you remember when we talked about Ford v Ferrari, Matt Damon, Christian Bale film, I was ruining the podcast going off on one about how that's not how late braking works or whatever, and you were going, it's not the fucking point. And,
yes, I remember that.
And now that I listen back to it, I was like, yeah, you're absolutely right. I was kind of right, but in the nerdiest, most annoying way. And it does not matter. The story and the way the film it carries you through is so much more important than some detail about how this or that works.
Yeah, though, I suppose part of the reason why Hollywood always devoted so much money and care to try to be historically authentic, even though they never quite managed and so on, is because there would always be someone in the audience who would point it out to them, right? Or for whom it would bother, or, so I think it's a balance. Yeah, you want to be kind of, you want the audience on side, and you want kind of all of the audience on side, to some degree. Though, it's not always manageable. But you also have to keep a perspective on, what is the film about?
Yeah. I mean, here I would say there is like almost no balance when it comes to the level of authenticity, because you do have that the kind of the look that it surrounds itself with is extremely authentic. But the way that those races go, I don't think you have to be into F1 to get this sense that they would have been like banned within a race, because for the shit that Brad Pitt was pulling, the idea is that he's coming in to cause chaos and ruin everyone else's race for specific strategic reasons. The kind of stuff that he's doing, they would know was going on, right? They wouldn't go, oh, how come he's taking so long in the pits? How come he's doing this, that, and the other? Like he would get banned, right? It's just completely unrealistic. You just go with it.
I don't know. I love that whole thing, because for me, the reason why Formula driving is so boring, right, is because you just assume they're all great drivers and it's just a car, right? That's it, right? Whereas actually what this film does is, it shows you skills of strategy and psychology and things like tires and weight and so it gives you the rules of a game that you can then now see how it's skilled, right?
Well, that is interesting actually, because I sort of thought you're probably not familiar with F1 that much.
I'm not at all.
So I'm interested to know, like, to the extent to which you were confused or not confused by what you were saying.
Well, no, the film made it really legible. I think it's one of the film's strengths. Yeah, that you see what's at stake in any given moment, right? But that you also begin to appreciate the work and the skill of somebody like the Brad Pitt figure, right? Who's practicing, who's kind of looking at wind conditions and balance and, the curve of that particular...
the floor part that they have.
So all of those kinds of things, like you think, okay, well now you realize that it takes kind of a million factors in winning this race when it's just a matter of seconds. Right, and kind of, these things are so calculated and it must be so difficult to do, and you begin to value and appreciate those skills.
That's interesting. That's definitely something that I think it communicates well, and it's something that is true of F1, that it's like the right thing to communicate. Because on the other hand, it also communicates the idea that these races are constantly incredibly exciting, and that is just not true of F1. F1 is like regularly boring, and people constantly go, that was a shit race. But the other thing that, and I think one of the ways in which it conveys all that stuff you're talking about is through the use of the commentary, the newspeak. So this is something that is very common to sports films, because, as you say, they're setting up a game. You have to understand the game, and you're going to be showing this to audiences who don't necessarily understand the game, and so you have to devote a lot of time to commentators going, okay, he's in first and he's in second, and here's what happens, and here are the rules, and here's the possibilities, and here's the standings, here's how many races are left, if this happens. Well, there's a lot of detail that has to be conveyed, and it can be very tricky to do so in a way that's not completely boring. Here, I think it's actually it's got a lot to do, and I think it does it, for the most part, very efficiently.
I think it does very well.
Even things that are reasonably nuanced, like the fact that in the last race, they've the team we're following has one extra set of soft tyres to use. And the commentary explains that this is because they didn't use them in a previous round, and they're able to deploy them now. Other teams won't get the benefit of that, so that's something. And it's like the film is, for one thing, that's essentially realistic. I mean, the fact that they're up in first after being so bad is like not so realistic. But then they're in a realistic situation. The film explains it quite quickly and quite efficiently. It's also something that's not actually that unrealistic when it comes to the commentary. The commentary would have to explain that in real life. It is a little bit unusual. It's like things like that. You could get bogged down. It actually is very efficient. It works really well.
Yes, I mean, I liked the film very much. I thought it was exciting to watch. I liked the music. I was really impressed with the editing. Yeah, kind of. It did make it seem exciting. And really, the only thing that I would argue is not so successfully realized is those cliched moments that we spoke about, right? Which I see as moments of acting out dialogue that is cliched, but actually the actor's not succeeding at landing it in a better way. Yeah, and I think there is a difference between the more experienced movie stars who do almost always manage to land even really cliched things. The whole ending with Javier Bardem bit was like entirely a cliche, right? And yet he kind of lands it, I think. Whereas some of the younger actors, you know, who are very good, I think, don't quite land those moments as well, and you feel the cliche, in a way that the more experienced actors supersede.
Yeah. So I've been seeing people sort of talking about this film as like immediately one of the great racing movies, and I'm thinking to myself, you probably haven't seen enough movies. I think people saying that are probably coming from racing more than from cinema.
Yeah.
Because it's not a bad film at all, but it's
not a great film.
a great one. But on the other hand, it's also possible that there just haven't been in that many great racing movies. You can probably count them on like the fingers of half a hand. Yeah.
I mean, I forget the titles now because you know how bad I am with it, but yeah, there are at least 3 really famous ones. I think the Paul Newman one, the Steve McQueen one, and the James Garner one were really famous ones.
I know
in their day.
Steve McQueen was Le Mans, right?
Right.
I've not seen it.
And maybe was Paul Newman Grand Prix or was that James Gardner?
Can't remember.
Actually,
we should maybe look him up.
Yeah, let's do that.
But then, as I said before, in recent years, the one that captured everyone was Rush, and that is a properly brilliant film.
Yeah. And actually, that surprised me because I think it's such a good film. It didn't do well. Yeah.
No, did it not?
No.
Rush. Oh no, it did. It cost 38 million and made 100. It's okay.
It lost money then because, you know, that amount of money with those stars, the advertising would have, and you need to make at least 2.5 to 3 times to break even. And
what we were saying before, you were saying this movie's cost between $200 and $300 million. It's made 350, and we're talking about it making its money back.
Because we're talking about it making its money back. Well, actually, I shouldn't have said that then. But it's just week 1, isn't it? Yeah.
It's been open for a couple of weeks, I think. Hang on. It was released June 27th.
Yeah.
In the States, which is 2.5 weeks ago.
Okay. Well, they normally need to make 2.5 to 3 times, right? And I know for a fact that Rush lost money, and it certainly performed below expectations. And particularly since it was such a good film. So James Garner did Grand Prix in 1966, which I believe was a very considerable hit. Yeah, it had a budget of $9 million and made 20.8 in rentals, right? So that was a big hit.
People also are very fond of Ford v Ferrari, which we've mentioned, which I would say is much better than this. But he's also not in the great movies thing. And when people talk that up as one of the great racing movies, that's one thing that makes me think, are there enough racing movies, or have you seen enough movies yourself? It was fine. It was very good fun, but it's not a great film. Yeah,
though actually it's one of those things because when I saw it, there were a lot of things I didn't like about it. But actually images, kind of, you know, the use of colour, they really stayed in my mind. Yeah,
it does stay with you. And I watched it again recently. It's a very easy watch. Also, I mean, partially because Christian Bale's playing a guy from Birmingham, and it's just amazing to hear the shit he says in his accent. It's fantastic. You know,
the Paul Newman film was called Winning, and again, it was one of the top hits of the year. It made 14.6 million in rentals, and I think it was the 13th, top grosser of that year. Anyway, that's enough. Yeah.
Of course, I suppose we're forgetting in a way Fast and Furious. Although that became much different to racing after about the 3rd or 4th film, it just became about hiring themselves out to the US military or something.
I completely forgotten about that, and they're weird because, I have now seen almost all of them. Often not by desire. Usually you're in some small town, there's nothing else to see, and that's what you see at the cinema, right? That's happened to me a surprising number of times with those Fast and Furious films. I always kind of enjoy watching them, and they always feel grotesque, and the kind of explanation of why America is in the state it's in, because those films have a moral ugliness to them.
Yeah. So there you go, summing it up.
There you go.
I think F1 is easy to recommend.
Yes.
It's enormously good fun. It looks wonderful. It's got good jokes. It's got very exciting action. It's very expensively made. That's a joy in itself.
Yeah.
It's not very good, kind of fundamentally, like underneath everything. It has all of these issues. But if you're of the right mindset, you go, well, I'm here for all of them.
I mean, as someone who really doesn't care about cars or racing or F1, I had a very good time. I enjoyed it very much, and it looks beautiful. So I would recommend it.
It would be nice to see if Joseph Kosinski can make, like a really good movie as opposed to just a really good action B movie now. Because that is what he's made his name doing, really.
Actually, I think for me the problem is, can he direct actors and scenes of human relations? Because that's his test. I mean, he can do action, I think, incredibly well. He can visualize kind of beautifully, right? But directing actors and making scenes of human relationships live and breathe and kind of have
make them
depth.
complex.
Make them complex. That would be a test for him still.
Yeah, and his screenwriter probably.
Yes. Right.
So there you go. It's an advert for F1, and you pay to see it, and it's quite fun.
Yes. So thank you very much for listening. We are Eavesdropping at the Movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, and YouTube Music. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies, and Blue Sky, eavesdropping.bsky.social, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.